This is Reid Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side Radio, folks. Happy Saturday, Rocky Mountains, from Montana to New Mexico and Nebraska to Utah. KGAB AM 650 in the Town Square Network, serving the Intermountain West, and Easy 101, Colorado Springs, serving southern Colorado and northern New Mexico, and, of course, Monster 780 out of Denver, serving practically the world. It's great to be back with you guys. I'm going to give you a little breather from my 1, 2, 3, 4 punch on Obamacare, which hopefully you got something out of. And if you missed any of those shows, archives, www.ontherightsideradio.com. Particularly, ladies, listen to Dr. Fleet, who talks about how you, ladies, are being targeted, particularly in this health care law. And if you're older than 50, well, your life is about to change. Listen to that show. We're switching gears today. You know, there are so many bad things, so many concerning things happening in the world and domestically. It's tough to keep track, even for somebody like me who keeps track. But we're going to shift our focus to Islamic extremism, homegrown terror through Muslim auspices, not through veterans and religious groups. And I have an expert on the phone with me today. Many of you probably know his name. His name is Erick Stakelbeck. He's written 2 books. In fact, one just came out in July. The first is The Terrorist Next Door, How the Government is Deceiving You About the Islamist Threat. Gee, where have you heard that before? And the second, which came out in July, is The Terrorist Next Door, and it's about Al-Qaeda. And should we say the growth of Al-Qaeda, what the Muslims, the extremist Muslims, are planning in terms of infiltration of America and Western democracies, and they've already had great success in Europe, which we're going to be talking about. They're now using that plan as a model for America. And, you know, Erick is kind of the Paul Revere out there ringing the alarm bells. Welcome to the show, Erick.
Hey, Reid, great to be with you. Just real quick, I hate to correct you, but my new book is called It's called The Brotherhood, America's Next Great Enemy. It's about the Muslim Brotherhood. The Terrorist Next Door was the old one, but the new one, which I know we'll be talking about a lot today, is called The Brotherhood, America's Next Great Enemy. Yeah,
well, I'm glad you did correct me, because actually that's the focus of the show, particularly with what's happened in Egypt over the last month or two, the, shall we say, bye-bye to Morsi, which I was happy to see, but somehow our administration was not happy to see. And we're going to be talking about the Muslim Brotherhood, as you do in your book, basically as the, shall we say, the hub of the wheel of terrorism worldwide, the hub of the wheel of Muslim infiltration worldwide. The Muslim Brotherhood, folks, are not the warm fuzzies the administration wants you to be. And I'll tell you what, let's start off there. Tell us what you think, Erick, because you've been studying this for years. I mean, you've been on all sorts of shows, Neil Cavuto, Fox and Friends, America's Newsroom. You've talked to the Jewish Institute for National Security Affairs, Act for America. You've even addressed, I bet that was fun, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Were they awake?
Half awake.
Yeah,
it was actually interesting, Reid. A bunch of them came up to me afterwards, and they said, "Hey, man, amen. We agree with what you're saying, but our hands are tied." These are the average rank and file guys. They get it.
Yeah, you know what? The average rank and file guys in a lot of these government agencies do get it, and I think they're doing their best. Our problem is at the extreme managerial level of these departments, Obama's czars, his administration, and, of course, the head honcho himself. There's no doubt about it. So tell us what you have uncovered over the last decade or so, and particularly over the last 3 or 4 years, about how truthful our government is with us concerning the Muslim threat.
Well, number one, Reid, they're completely untruthful, and especially about the Muslim Brotherhood. Look, our government right now, the Obama administration, is selling the Muslim Brotherhood to us as moderates, as our outreach partners in the Muslim world, as a counterweight to the really bad guys in Al-Qaeda. But, Reid, here's the truth. The Muslim Brotherhood is the granddaddy of them all when it comes to Islamic terrorist groups. They spawned Al-Qaeda. They created Hamas. And I make the point in the book, Reid, it might shock some people, but I say it without hesitation. If the Muslim Brotherhood was never created in Egypt way back in 1928, 9/11 would have never happened. I say it without hesitation. Everyone from Osama bin Laden to Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, everyone behind that attack before they formed Al-Qaeda, they belonged to the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood is the gateway drug to Islamic terrorism. Yet our government is trying to sell these guys, these hardened jihadists who, as we speak, Reid, are burning churches to the ground in Egypt. Our administration is trying to sell them as the good guys.
Just out of curiosity, why? What's your opinion?
Well, I think there's a few reasons here. I think there's two tracks I talk about in the book, Reid. I actually devote a whole chapter to this. On the first track, you have the naive bureaucrats at the State Department and in some of these government agencies who fail the first rule of war: know your enemy. They don't understand the Muslim Brotherhood's ideology. Look, terrorism is only a tactic. It is driven by a well-defined Islamist ideology. So they don't understand the enemy. And the other thing I talk about in the book, Reid, that I've interviewed these guys face-to-face, the Muslim Brotherhood. I've sat down with Brotherhood operatives. These guys are slick. They wear suits and ties. They're well-spoken. They're fluent in English, Western-educated. They're very charming. They're very deceptive. And our government, our mainstream media as well, fall for it hook, line, and sinker. They're charmed by it.
Let's talk about Van Jones. Drop the radical pose to achieve the radical ends. I mean, this is nothing new. This is Saul Alinsky adopted by the Muslim Brotherhood.
Yes, Reid, great call, because I've studied this as you have, man, and I'll tell you, the Alinsky method and the Brotherhood method are eerily similar, and that brings me to the second point, Reid, why this administration embraces the Brotherhood. Look, President Obama is a revolutionary leftist. He wants to fund it. He's not just your garden variety liberal, which is bad enough. He is a revolutionary leftist. He's a guy who wants to fundamentally transform America. He's made that clear. Well, radical leftists and radical Islamists have kind of struck up a strange alliance as of late. Very strange bedfellows, right? You think of the radical left with gay rights and the rest, and Islamists are executing gays, but they have a common enemy in traditional Judeo-Christian Western civilization. They despise traditional America, the traditional Judeo-Christian fabric of this country, the Constitution, the traditions. They despise them that much that they will work together. Now, they want different things. The radical left, I don't know, I guess they want some kind of socialist utopia. The radical Islamists want sharia law. But they will work together because they share a common enemy. Now, at the end of the day, the left, if the Brotherhood had their way, the left would be the first ones with their heads on the chopping block. But they are that short-sighted, that naive. And in the president's case, I think, Reid, he also sees the Muslim world as the victims of imperialism, of Western colonialism, as a persecuted minority group. I think that also plays into it. But whatever the factors are, it's a disaster for America.
Yeah, I happen to agree with that latter statement. I mean, this is all, in the end, this is rooted, I think, in the Obama administration in the word social justice and the word fair. Folks, if you remember, many of you, I interviewed Dinesh D'Souza, okay, Obama's America, and that was last October before the election. Go back to the archives and listen to that, because it was centered, that interview, on the whole concept that Obama has, and which he got from his father, by the way, Dreams of My Father. Read Obama's book, but buy it used. Don't send him any money. Buy it in a used bookstore, but read it. Know your enemy. Because imperialism, Israel is the little imperialist, America is the big imperialist. And remember that America, in Obama's mind, listen to that interview, while he wants to redistribute wealth within the country and create social justice, which is what Erick is talking about on an even broader scale than just money, okay, he also views America as the top 1% of the planet. He wants to export our talent, our goods, our services, our funds, and, yes, our rights over to others. And I think that's driving part of this Muslim thing. Let's go one step further on this, Erick. If you've read Obama's book, and I'm sure you have, I mean, there are some passages in there. If the political winds blow ill, I will support the Muslims. And that's a paraphrase. There's another passage, there's nothing more beautiful than the call to prayers in the evening. I mean, if you read that book and really pick out cherry pick those thoughts of his. Would you, in your mind, do you think he is Muslim sympathetic, or do you think at heart he is a Muslim?
I think either way, Reid, it kind of comes to the same. It kind of comes around full circle to the same outcome.
Exactly.
If he's clearly, President Obama is fond of Islam. He says he's a Christian. I don't know the man's heart. You know, I'd like to take him at his word. He's unlike any Christian that I've met in terms of being weaned under Reverend Wright with this hateful brand of racist Christianity that I guess Reverend Wright created on his own from the Black Liberation Movement. So in the book, I say my view on President Obama is that he's more of the revolutionary leftist Marxist stripe. But that said, he's a man who is clearly fond of Islam, and he is, yes, pro-Islam in my view. That's without a doubt. He's thrown Israel under the bus at every turn. He's empowered the Muslim Brotherhood, radical Islamist forces. You take it back to June 2009, that infamous Cairo speech. His administration demanded that the Brotherhood be present at that speech.
The first time in decades, and the first time by any Western leader at any time. And it really, I think, Eric, tell me if you think I'm wrong, it ushered in the Arab Spring, and it gave impetus and fire to the entire Islamic extremist movement.
Absolutely. That's the same speech where he hit out against Israel very hard as well, Reid. Yep. And to empower the Brotherhood, which you said had been banned for decades, and all of a sudden to give them credibility and legitimacy to ask that they have a seat at his speech was a big deal. And the Arab Spring, the so-called Arab Spring, unfolded thereafter. Look, this is a man whose father was a Muslim. His stepfather was a Muslim. This is a man who attended an Islamic madrasa for a time as a child. The guy's fond of Islam. And also, Islam is not Judeo-Christian. It's not Western. It's not traditional America. It's more exotic. And look, Muslims are an aggrieved minority, victims of imperialism in his view. So yeah, he's a guy who has come down on the side of Islam time after time after time during his administration. I take it that I see him more as the transformative leftist type, which is bad enough. But whatever he's doing, it's clearly to the benefit of radical Islamists.
Why don't we leave it with this summation? Rather than an uneasy truce between adversaries with a common enemy, i.e. America and her values, and the Western world and its values, what we have in Obama is a very easy truce. He likes having the Muslims as allies, even though they may differ in certain respects from his leftist agenda, i.e. gay rights, abortion, women's rights, etc., etc. Would that be a fair summation?
That is a very fair summation, Reid. You said it much more eloquently than I could, and it's interesting because I'm asked this a lot, and I wish I was a psychiatrist, Reid, for a day, and I could have the president on a couch and just get inside and say, "Where are you coming from?" Because
is that what you do if you had him on a? Is that what you do if you had him on a couch?
I have some questions. I mean, 5 years. This guy came on the scene 2007 in a real big way, man, and he's still just a very enigmatic figure. But whatever it is, it's bad. That's all I know.
Yes, it is dark and malevolent on many different levels. So let's segue from there. I mean, we're not being told the truth. There are reasons we're not being told the truth. There are reasons he stands up there and says the war on terror is over and all this other nonsense, to be followed shortly thereafter by Boston. Let's go international first, so to give people some background. So right now in Egypt, we have an Egyptian military who I'm cheering for, and 70% of the Egyptian population. Folks, there were 36 to 46, somewhere in there, million Egyptians in the street wanting the Brotherhood out. Think about how many people that is. That is New York, Chicago, Houston, and L.A. in the streets. That's how many people wanted the Brotherhood out. This is the popular will in Egypt. And the army, which is the tradition over there, is carrying out the popular will. They are the arbiters of justice in the end. Now, Obama can't seem to get off his feet on this, you know. He has chastised the army. He has almost demanded, although he's guised it in his usual warm, fuzzy nonsense, that Morsi and the Brotherhood be reseated because it was a democratic election. What is happening in Egypt, and how is that going to affect the Brotherhood, including in Syria, which, of course, is a total friggin' nightmare that once again he's stepped into? It's a lose-lose for the United States no matter what we do.
Mm-hmm. Reid, here's some good news. I actually met with a group of Egyptian officials here in the States yesterday, and they told me, look, the military is getting a handle on the Brotherhood, and they're slowly putting the Brotherhood down for now. Let's remember, the Muslim Brotherhood has been down and out before in the early 1950s. I get into the history of this group in the book, Reid. In the early 50s, they were crushed in Egypt. The Muslim Brotherhood's headquarters was burnt to the ground in Cairo. The military arrested, executed Brotherhood leaders. They were banned for decades, then they roared all the way back, and by 2012, they had won the presidency. So they've been down this road before. They're kind of like jihadi zombies. You know, you try and kill them, and you can't keep them down. So they're not going to go away quietly. That is clear, and they're revealing their true face here the past few weeks, Reid, burning churches to the ground, attacking the Egyptian military. Right now, hey, look, they've taken a big hit. Egypt is their hub. It's the brothership, so to speak. That is their main hub. They've taken a big hit there, but remember, they're present in some 70 countries around the world. We could still see in Egypt the possibility of civil war, Reid, or at least sustained civil unrest if the Brotherhood's followers say, look, we're not going to go quietly. It's going to be jihad. We could have a lot of trouble there. And look no further than the Suez Canal, where I think some 7 or 8% of the world's oil and liquefied gas passes through every day on its way to Europe and America. Yes, America. If the Brotherhood, its terrorist allies, attack the Suez Canal, shut it down, every American will feel it in their pocketbook each time they go to the pump. Oil and gas prices will skyrocket. And also, Reid, real quick, Israel. Egypt's Sinai Peninsula with Israel has become an al-Qaeda hotbed. If attacks are launched against Israel out of Egypt, out of the Sinai, Israel responds because it has to defend itself. We could see a regional war, and that also would send the global economy into a tailspin. So every American needs to care about what's happening over there.
Yeah, and to put it in perspective for you folks, the Suez Canal allows 2 ships to pass very close to one another at one time. I mean, it is a narrow little band of water. Just think what would happen if the Muslim Brotherhood, as part of their retribution and resistance against the Egyptian army, decided to sink 2 ships in the Suez Canal. I mean, we're not talking the impossible. It's pretty realistic. And, you know, you folks that are listening have already seen your gas prices go up if you've been watching them over the last few weeks. Eric is not beating the alarmist drums here. You could see gas prices in the $6, $7, $8, $9, $10 a gallon range. And once again, I think it goes back to that redistribution, that social justice policy, Eric. I think one of the reasons that Obama does everything he can to stifle American energy independence is that every barrel of oil we buy from a Muslim country, primarily the Mideast, is a redistribution of wealth from the top 1% of the world, America, to the rest of the world. Have you thought about that at all?
I have. He's a guy, our president, who wants America to be just another nation. We got to fall in with the rest of the pack. We are standing in the way, Reid, and you kind of referenced it earlier. The U.S. and Israel, 2 fiercely sovereign nations, pretty much the 2 only fiercely sovereign nations left in many ways in terms of democratic nations. We have to be weakened in order for this new global order to kind of take shape. We have to take a back seat. Israel needs to yield and get with the program. That's the view of these revolutionary leftists like President Obama. America needs to be knocked down a peg. We're the bad guy. We've caused problems. We've been imperialists. Israel is the imperialist nation oppressing the Palestinians. This is the worldview. And it's interesting. You mentioned Syria, Reid, which we're talking gas prices going up. Who knows what kind of misadventure we're about to get involved in Syria right now, where on one hand you have al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood, and they're fighting Iran, Hezbollah, and the Assad regime. Now, to me, when 5 of our greatest enemies are killing each other, I say, hey, have at it, boys. But for some reason, we're going to get involved in this Syrian conflict. And I'll tell you, the blowback from what's about to go down in Syria could be very nasty. Iran, Syria, Hezbollah are making noise about firing rockets and missiles at Israel if Syria is hit by U.S. cruise missiles. This could really turn into a wider regional war. You have Russia lurking in the background. So the only question about war in the Middle East is not if, it's when. What will be the trigger? Will it be Egypt? Will it be Syria? Most likely it'll be Iran's nuclear weapons program, which I can tell you Israel is not going to live with. But it is coming, and people need to be prepared.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I'll tell you what, let's step back for a moment. What would you suggest people do to be prepared? I happen to agree with you 100%. I mean, the great enemy of Western civilization is, in fact, Muslim extremism. You know, I don't personally have a problem with Islam. I don't have a problem with any religion. But I do have a problem with religious extremists. And I don't care whether they're left, right, Christian, Muslim, it doesn't matter. Okay? Anytime you start imposing your will upon me, I don't like it. Anytime you want to kill me because you can impose your will on it, I go from not liking it to absolutely bristling about it. And that's what we are facing with Muslim extremism. I mean, it's either sharia or die, and I'm not being facetious here. What would you suggest the folks at home? You got hundreds of thousands of people listening to you. You and I know this is coming. We don't know exactly where the match is going to be set to the powder keg, although it's going to be somewhere in the Mideast. We don't know exactly when. We don't know exactly how far-reaching or how long-lasting it will be. But what can folks at home do to kind of prepare for it?
Well, I think on the practical level, Reid, buy a lot of water and stock up on canned food, dried goods. I mean, be smart in that way. You know, I mean, be smart. I'm not an expert on survival in terms of being a survivalist, but hey, I have common sense, and I have 2 small children, man. I'm ready. You know, I have guns. Hey, man, we still have a Second Amendment in this country, especially out where your show is beaming, Reid. That's America still. So
yeah, that is
have the right to bear arms.
That is the backbone of the Western world right now.
That's right. Amen. Exercise your Second Amendment rights. Be armed. Have food. Have water. That's the practical common sense stuff. Have an escape route.
I would also add to that. First of all, folks, if you go back into the archives, look for Nancy Stewart's Home Security, I think is the section that it's in. She served 5 presidents. She was in charge of national safety and disaster planning. She has a list of things that you need to have in your house, which are fantastic. I mean, there were things I had never even thought of. Listen to that show. Very, 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 very important. And listen, store some fuel. Do it right. Have it in, plastic-approved jerry cans, not metal, not glass. Store it away from the house. I mean, use your head. You can get safety programs from your local gas station or whatever, but have at least 1 tank of gas stored in case you have to vacate, because where you live may not be safe. I mean, I'm not trying to raise alarms, and neither is Eric. This is just 2 plus 2 is 4. It's not 5, and it's not 3. And there is, I think in your hearts, listeners, big trouble brewing in the Mideast, and it's going to have far-reaching effects, particularly with an interconnected globe right now. Let's talk about, Eric, we've talked about the international, but where I really want to focus today is the domestic. We know what our administration thinks. We've discussed our hypothesis as to why. We are in complete agreement on the Muslim Brotherhood being the black widow spider that spawns all the rest, and hardly moderate, in fact, just the opposite. What are these guys doing in a non-violent way to infiltrate Western societies, and particularly the United States? Reid,
these guys are good. Oh, they're evil. They're bad. but they're good at what they do, and that strategy of stealth, of subversion, of moving in the shadows. They have made such inroads in this country and in Europe, Reid, I don't know where to begin. I have about 3 chapters in the new book devoted just to what the Brotherhood is doing here in America in our backyard. Number 1, we have Muslim Brotherhood-connected groups and individuals advising the Obama administration, advising our government on everything from immigration to the Middle East to counterterrorism. In the book, I name names. I can give you a name right now. One of the groups is called the Islamic Society of North America, ISNA for short. Now, White House officials have called ISNA their preferred outreach partner in the American Muslim community. Why is that a problem? Yeah. It's slightly problematic, Reid, because a few years ago, ISNA was named as an unindicted co-conspirator in the largest terrorism financing trial in American history. But now they're our friends. Not only that, ISNA officials were given a tour of the White House back in March. This is a group that a federal judge has said has, quote, there is ample evidence that ISNA has ties to Hamas. Yet this is our outreach partner. We have ISNA's president, a guy named Mohammed Majid, meeting with President Obama about immigration, about the Middle East, quote-unquote, peace process. And this is a guy, and this is a group. Look, this is some information that'll shock some people, Reid. Back in 2004, not to get too in the weeds, back in 2004, our own FBI conducted a raid of a leading global Muslim Brotherhood operative's home just 10 minutes from Washington, D.C., where I'm sitting right now in the belly of the beast. In this Brotherhood operative's home, the FBI uncovered 80 boxes of Muslim Brotherhood documents, top secret stuff. Now, once these documents were translated from Arabic into English, they were very revealing. They named 29 American Muslim organizations that are, quote, friends of the Muslim Brotherhood. Guess who was on that list? ISNA, the Islamic Society of North America. Not only that, Reid, those
just out of curiosity, was CARE on it?
The only reason CARE wasn't on it yet, Reid, is because this document dated back to 1991. Gotcha. CARE was created in 94 by Muslim Brotherhood members, I might add. I document this in the book. So ISNA was the very first group on the list. Isn't that something? And in those same documents, which, again, our government has in its possession, this is the equivalent of having Hitler's strategic documents during World War II. In those documents, it says the Muslim Brotherhood is in America, I'm paraphrasing, in America to destroy Western civilization from within. They call it a civilization jihadist process. That is why the Muslim Brotherhood is here. ISNA is a group that the Brotherhood's own documents name as a Muslim Brotherhood front, yet they are darkening the halls of our White House. That's how bad it is right now.
Not only that, but to draw an analogy for the audience, for the White House to say that ISNA is their preferred partner in dealing with Muslim affairs would be kind of like FDR saying that Goebbels was his preferred partner in dealing with affairs of the Nazi Reich. I mean, this is the best analogy I can come up with.
Reid, we had the... Yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, what I wanted to ask about is the Brotherhood has actually published a white paper, a game plan on how to infiltrate Western nations, how to indoctrinate school children, how to insert Sharia law into the legal process, into the education process, and how to work the media, shall we say, to best advantage of promotion of Sharia law and eventually a worldwide Muslim caliphate. Is that correct?
It is, and I just referenced one of them, Reid. There's actually 2 documents that I lay them out in the book. One is the one that I just named that was discovered just outside of Washington, D.C. How nice. You think they're not here? They're 10 minutes from the White House. So that was one of the documents. The other document, which I think you're referencing, Reid, is known as the Project. Now, this was a document found right after 2001 in Switzerland, of all places. Swiss authorities conducted a raid of another leading Brotherhood operative's home. He lived in a luxurious villa in Switzerland, and it was a leading Brotherhood guy, and they uncovered this document. Well, what a document to uncover. It's become known in law enforcement intelligence circles as the Project, and Reid, as you said, it lays out a Muslim Brotherhood strategy for global and in particular Western domination. They're going to do it in a few ways. Number one, mass immigration. Number two, proselytizing, converting people. Number three, working with groups like the left who share a common dislike for Western civilization. Number four, opposing Israel at every turn, being fiercely anti-Semitic. And a fifth thing, which I think is fascinating, is building mosques. The Muslim Brotherhood, in both of these secret documents that we're referencing, Reid, they talk about the importance of the Islamic Center. They call the Islamic Center, the mosque, quote, the beehive of the Muslim Brotherhood movement in America. They call it the axis of the movement where battalions are supplied. Well, surprise, surprise, I don't think it's any coincidence that in the past 13 years, since the year 2000, the number of mosques in America has doubled from 1,200 to well over 2,000 now. And that's since 9/11, really, the bulk of these mosques have been built. Now, not every mosque is a terror hotbed. We know that. But looking at the Muslim Brotherhood's own documents, which stress again and again the importance of mosque building, and seeing mosques pop up around the country from coast to coast in some of the most unlikely places. I document in the book, Reid, the Heartland, the Bible Belt. Seeing all that unfold, you have to think that there may be a larger strategy at work here with this mosque-building craze around America.
You know, just out of curiosity, you're talking basically to the Rocky Mountain states right now. So, and there's people from all over the world that listen to the archives, but the AM broadcaster to the Rocky Mountain states, what's happening in our area that people may recognize in terms of this mosque build, this battalion command, which is really what it is, right? This is no different than a well-orchestrated, non-military setup. I mean, it's exactly what it is. You have regimental command, you have battalion command, and everybody has a command post. Everything centers around the command post. The orders go out, the soldiers go out, they have their missions, whatever they happen to be. They may be violent or nonviolent. They may be strictly focused on conversion of people to Islamic thought or to the Muslim religion. What's happening in the Rocky Mountains in that regard?
You just explained it beautifully, by the way, Reid. This is how the Brotherhood views it. That's exactly how they view it according to their own words. In the Rocky Mountain area, I can't say in particular. I'm covering this stuff, man, from coast to coast in Europe and in the Middle East. In the Rocky Mountain area, off the top of my head, I can't tell you particulars. I will say two things. Number one, we remember Najibullah Azazi back in 2009, who was out in Colorado, who was plotting to blow up the subway system in New York City, the Afghan immigrant. So there's a history there in that regard. I'd say number two, I'm almost certain, being that Denver is a large city and you got Colorado Springs out there, you have universities like Colorado State, which, by the way, Colorado State University, remember Anwar al-Awlaki, who was an al-Qaeda leader?
That's my alma mater. I'm very familiar with it.
He also attended Colorado State University.
Yes,
as a matter of fact, very interesting, Reid, he was the president of the Muslim Students Association at Colorado State, and the Muslim Students Association is the original Muslim Brotherhood front organization in America. It was the very first Muslim Brotherhood-connected organization established in this country. Again, we see the Brotherhood as the gateway. Anwar al-Awlaki ended up with al-Qaeda, but he started with the Muslim Brotherhood. Again, we see the Brotherhood as a gateway. I'm sure that mosques are being built in Denver. And again, I'm not tarring every Muslim. I'm not tarring every mosque. I know that not every Muslim is a terrorist. That's the obligatory disclaimer you have to give, because the Brotherhood groups like CARE, etc., when you criticize the Brotherhood, they try to paint you as hating all Muslims.
Oh, well, listen,
not true.
It's religious to racism is what it is. I mean,
exactly. You're an Islamophobe.
It's the fallback punt whenever the left and or Muslims are attacked. I mean, and unfortunately, people feel somehow guilty about it. I don't feel guilty about it. The facts are the facts. And in my mind, I'm going to go one step further. it's absolutely true. Many Muslims, maybe most, are not extremists. It's very true that many Muslims, particularly in the United States, while they would like to see their religion expanded, as I think any religious person would, depending upon your bent, they're not going to coerce people. They're not going to twist arms. But I have a big problem with moderate Muslims not standing up and castigating the extremists in their religion. And as far as I'm concerned, he who does not stand for principles has none, period. And it doesn't matter whether you're Muslim or you're Jewish or you're Christian. He who does not stand for their principles has none. So I view moderate Muslims who would be your neighbors and good neighbors, Muslims who are not hell-bent on, inserting sharia into the legal doctrine, sharia into churches, sharia into the educational system. When they don't stand up, when there's acts of terror or there's acts of subversion, as we're talking about right now, I'll tell you what, they kind of cross the line in my mind.
Yeah, and there's a lot of reasons, I think, for the silence, Reid. I'm still waiting for that million Muslim march against terrorism on the National Mall.
I'm kind of waiting for that myself.
Yeah, it's been 12 years. I'd love to see it. But, some Muslims I talk to, it's interesting. I work with moderate Muslims who do oppose jihad and Sharia, and they're very secretive. They don't want to be on camera. They want their faces blurred. They want their voices disguised because they're afraid. They're afraid they'll be killed. Not all some are just silent. I think they're complicit in their silence, many. But some genuinely moderate Muslims who do oppose the bad guys, there's definitely a fear factor there. I will say they're afraid their families will be killed. Look, the Muslim Brotherhood means business. These guys don't mess around. They come into mosques in America, and I've interviewed moderate Muslims who have seen their mosques literally taken over by the Brotherhood, taken over by the Brotherhood ideology. And I'll never forget, Reid, I interviewed one guy in Tulsa, Oklahoma a few years ago. Tulsa, Oklahoma, of all places, the heartland, right? He had written an op-ed. This is a Muslim guy. He's Pakistani descent. He had written an op-ed criticizing Al-Qaeda, blasting Al-Qaeda, calling them evil, and, castigating them. Well, the next day he shows up at the mosque, and people at the mosque are waving the article at him in the newspaper, screaming at him. They physically attacked him, threw shoes at him, and chased him out of the mosque because he spoke out against Al-Qaeda. This is the situation you have in some of these American mosques.
There's a lesson. There's a lesson, I think. Sorry to interrupt, Eric, but
sure.
I want you listeners to think about this. This is what they do to their own. Imagine what they will do to you.
Exactly. And the end game in all this, in a word I want to throw out there, Reid, that everyone needs to know. It's a funny word, but everyone needs to know. The end game for every Islamic radical group, whether it's the Brotherhood, Al-Qaeda, they differ in tactics, but they all want to get to the same place. It's Islamic Sharia law for one and all, whether we like it or not, and the return of that Islamic caliphate. I know it's a funny word, caliphate, but everyone needs to know it because that's what they're all working towards. What that is basically a united Muslim states. Picture every Muslim nation united, economically, militarily, politically, controlling a good supply of the world's oil, speaking with one powerful voice at the UN against America, against Israel, possibly being nuclear armed if things keep going the way they're going. That's a formidable foe. The caliphate existed for, most of Islam's existence. The caliphate ruled the Muslim world. It was a united entity to take on the West. And that is what the Muslim Brotherhood, Al-Qaeda, no matter who they are, that is what they want to reestablish. Whether they're doing it stealthily, like we see with the Brotherhood, like we see in Turkey, President Obama's good friends, or whether it's Al-Qaeda, they all want the caliphate. That is the end game here.
Folks, once again, go back in the archives. This is about 6 weeks ago. I did an interview with Alexander Del Riata, who is the CEO of Full Spectrum Dominance, 50 million hits a month from around the globe. And he talked about the rise of the East and the fall of the West. And it ties right into our discussion here. And he goes back 5,000 years in history. It would be a fascinating foundation to the discussion Eric and I just had. So definitely listen to that show. Eric, let's take a little break here. Where can folks get your books? Give them the names of the books again, and I'm sure you have a website which explains stuff, so share that with us.
Sure, Reid. I appreciate it. Look, the new book came out July 15th. It's very timely and doing very well. It's called The Brotherhood, America's Next Great Enemy. The Brotherhood, America's Next Great Enemy. You can find it at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever books are sold, you can find it. My first book, which I also encourage you to pick up, is called The Terrorist Next Door, How the Government is Deceiving You About the Islamist Threat. Imagine that. They're deceiving us. And,
really?
With the Boston bombing, yeah, right. With the Boston bombing in April, Reid, I said, wow, I warned about this 2 years ago. And unfortunately, it came to fruition. So The Brotherhood's the new one, hot off the presses, and the first book is The Terrorist Next Door. And you can check me out at cbnnews.com. I'm also on the Blaze TV a lot. I fill in for Glenn Beck as a guest host, and I appear on Fox News. So, busy guy, but, got to sound the alarm.
Folks, get those books. Share them with your neighbors. Have your neighbors get the books. We got a ways to go, but the last 10 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever of this show is going to be what you need to look for in your local communities, your county, your state, and your local communities in terms of the telltale signs of Muslim extremism tentacles, be it Brotherhood or otherwise, creeping into your community and what you can do to stop it. Because I really believe it's kind of like Agenda 21. Is this going to be stopped at the local level? The federal level, it needs far more radical change than that. Eric, when we're talking about the plan that the Muslim Brotherhood has, we're going to take a short station break here in a bit. But when we come back, I want to talk about how they have implemented that plan in certain countries in Europe. For instance, 40% Muslim population in France through the migration theory, the building of the mosque command posts in Britain, what that has brought to that country. And I want to explain to people that this isn't pie in the sky. This has actually happened and is happening in Europe, and what's been successful in Europe, they're exporting right now with a vengeance to the United States. So people can see, by looking across the sea, exactly what is in store for us unless people start opening their eyes and demanding that things be changed. So we'll come right back, folks, with those thoughts. This is Reid Lance Rosenthal on the right side, talking to the Intermountain West this Saturday, and I am joined by none other than probably one of the foremost experts, and I think the Paul Revere of America looking out for Muslim extremism, Erick Stakelbeck. And we're going to be right back with not only our discussion of what they've done in Europe, how they're bringing that to the United States, but what you can look for and how you can stop it. We'll be right back.
400,000 readers have made the Threads West, an American Saga series, a #1 bestseller in 2011 and 2012. Threads West and Maps of Fate are the first two books of a 16-book tale of the adventure and romance of America, her people, her spirit in the West, winning 8 major national awards including Best Western, Best Romance, and Best Historical Fiction. Author Reid Lance Rosenthal is a fourth-generation land and cattleman whose cowboy heart and poet's pen capture the spirit of the American landscape. His long-standing devotion to wild and remote places into the people, both past and present, who leave their legend and footprint upon America and the American West, is the inspiration for all of his writing. Books 1 and 2, Threads West and Maps of Fate, are available at all major bookstores, Hastings, Barnes & Noble, and on Amazon.com. Book 1 is also available in audio format. Watch for the release of Book 3, Uncompagre, in March. Go to threadswestseries.com. That's www.threadswestseries.com.
This is Reid Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side Radio. Welcome back, folks. I hope you enjoyed that little commercial, Threads West, an American Saga. Kind of the antithesis of what we've been talking about the last 4 weeks, big government, loss of individualism, and today with Eric, shall we say, a full frontal assault cleverly guised in suits, ties, and impeccable English on the values that we hold dearest. So, Eric, when we went to break, we were talking about what's going on in Europe. You know, we've discussed the white, as I call it, the white paper, as law enforcement calls it, the project. They're far along on implementing the project in Europe, are they not?
Very far along, Reid. I've covered this at length. I cover it at length in the book as well, what the Muslim Brotherhood and Islamists are doing in Europe. It's actually quite astounding. Look, Muslim Brotherhood operatives and Muslim Brotherhood leaders, they say, look, we're going to conquer the West. We're going to conquer Rome, Europe, not through the sword this time. We're going to do it through immigration and proselytization. That's the dual track. We mentioned the mosque building, but right now I look at Brussels, 30% Muslim. I look at France, some 10% Muslim. Britain, massively exploding, no pun intended, Muslim population, and heavily Islamist. You look at a place like Sweden, Reid, of all places, Sweden, blonde, blue eyes, Scandinavian. The third largest city in Sweden, it is called Malmö, is now more than half Muslim, and the Jewish population there is on the run. So this is happening, Germany as well. This is happening throughout Western Europe. It's developed over the past 3 decades or so through mainly lax immigration policies. Secondly, political correctness, multiculturalism, not asking them to assimilate the new Muslim arrivals. This has been the death of Europe, part of the death of Europe. And native Europeans, you know, what are they fighting for? You know, I've been in Germany, Reid. I've interviewed these counter-jihad activists. Great guys. You know, they oppose Islamic extremism, but, you know, they're to a man, they're atheists, I mean, and to each his own, but they can't really tell you what they're fighting for other than the right to drink a beer and smoke a joint, I guess, you know? I mean, in America, we used to know what we were fighting for. I don't see that in Europe. Europe has lost its identity, yet the Muslims are coming in with great religious zeal, with a clear purpose. They know exactly what they want. They believe that the West is weak, that it's soft, that it's complacent, and it's tough to argue with them. So what you're seeing is, and I've walked these streets, Reid, I talk about it in the book, you're seeing in a place like London, you're seeing neighborhoods in East London where there is Islamic Sharia courts operating outside of British common law. You have imams acting as judge and jury over marital disputes and things of that nature, and eventually, Reid, if they have their way, they'll be judge, jury, and executioner. That's a natural trajectory of Islamic Sharia law. There is a day coming where you will see self-segregating Islamic enclaves in Europe. The goal is for America as well, where they are operating, they're pretty much living outside of their host society. We're seeing this right now in Western Europe. And 10 years ago, the Brits said, oh, it'll never happen here. Just like Americans are saying now, it'll never happen here. Oh, no? Go to New York City, to some areas of Queens or Brooklyn. Go to Dearborn, Michigan. Go to some areas of Chicago. Tell me it can never happen? The Muslim Brotherhood is laying the seeds right now to make it happen.
Yeah, listen, tell the folks about what's happening in Dearborn. I find that a fascinating microcosmic case study of a successful takeover of an entire community.
It is, Reid. I've walked the streets of Dearborn. Some call it Dearbornistan. It's got the largest Arab population in America, and it really is a case study. Here's how it works. In my book, I call it the enclave effect. A mosque is built. Many times it'll be built in an area where no Muslims live, but that's intentional. It's built there as a beachhead. More and more of these mosques are multi-million-dollar mega mosques that cover several acres of land. The mosque leadership can't tell you where the money's coming from. Saudi Arabia, hint, hint. The Persian Gulf, hint, hint. The mosque is built.
Well, the money. Let me interject just for a moment. The money is coming from Americans. Americans are buying foreign oil because we're not allowed to develop the oil resources and be completely independent in this country. We are redistributing our wealth to the Arab countries. They are taking our very own money and then funding our takeover. That's exactly what's going on.
Yes, they are. It's suicidal, isn't it? And yet, you know, we can't open a pipeline here. Hey, you know what's kind of encouraging, Reid, I have to say? Israel has had some big natural gas finds in the past few years off its coast, and I've talked to some folks who are convinced they're going to strike oil in a big way in Israel. So who knows? That would be a great thing for America, obviously, wean us off that Middle Eastern radical Islamic oil. But going back to the enclaves, the mosque is built. All of a sudden the locals might be Italian, Irish immigrants. They've lived in that neighborhood for 50 years. They don't quite like the sound of the call to prayer coming through their windows 5 times a day. They don't like the sight of women in burqas and men in Islamic garb, double parking all over the streets around the mosque. They don't like what's happening to their neighborhood, and they move out. Well, Muslims move in. All of a sudden it becomes a Muslim area centered again around that beehive, around the Islamic Center. All of a sudden the storefronts, the writing isn't in English anymore. It's in Arabic, and the neighborhood takes on a distinctly non-Western feel. You feel it in Dearborn when you walk those streets and areas of Dearborn, without a doubt. You also clearly feel it in East London, where I've spent time. It has a real third world feel, Reid. I have to say, there's a neighborhood in London called Tower Hamlets, which, in some sections you feel like you're in Pakistan. And I don't exaggerate. If you've been to East London lately, you've been to Tower Hamlets. Dearborn has also in some areas of Dearborn a distinctly non-Western feel, not the whole city, but gradually more and more it's kind of got that feel, and that is the goal. Okay, even if these groups can't establish Sharia across the whole country, they can have their little bases, their little enclaves, their little beachheads around the nation where it is heavily Islamicized, and they're marching to their own drummer of Sharia.
But it gets scarier because as they increase population around the beehives, around the battalion command posts, they also begin to infiltrate local government and local police forces. Tell us about what's happening in Dearborn along those lines.
I'll give you an example. In Dearborn, even if they're not infiltrated, they're able to intimidate and influence the police there. There were Christian evangelists a few years ago, Reid, actually summer 2012. A group of Christian evangelists, you have a right in this country to hand out tracts and, stand on the street corner and preach the gospel if you want to. It's America. And the Muslims have the same right to stand on the corner and to espouse their religion as long as they're not calling for anyone to be killed. We have that right in America. So a group of Christian evangelists went to a large Muslim Arab American Day event, annual thing in Dearborn, Michigan. Well, they were verbally, physically attacked. They were actually stoned. That's right. 4 Christian evangelists in America were stoned. The Muslims in attendance threw stones at these Christians. They were thrown in jail, if I'm not mistaken, and charged basically with inciting violence, of causing a ruckus. So this was in America.
Actually, what actually happened is the police would not protect them, told them to leave, and then when they were away from the area where all this occurred, pulled them over and threw them in jail.
Threw these guys in jail, 4 guys who were, Christians and espousing their faith. They weren't attacking anyone. They were respectful about it. They said, look, if you want a tract here, you can have a tract to learn about Jesus. I mean, they weren't beating anyone over the head. They're attacked by a Muslim mob, and then they're the ones who are arrested. So, unbelievable. I mean, this is happening in America in 2012. This is what's going on in Dearborn, Michigan right now. So that is the plan, writ large, for America. It sounds crazy. Oh, man, it'll never happen here. Again, the people of Europe said the same thing 15 years ago, and they're right now on a very slippery slope.
And the infiltration is not just at the local levels of government. Tell the folks a little bit about some of the Muslim Brotherhood advisors in the White House. And I almost choke when I say this, advising the FBI, CIA, and NSA.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit earlier, Reid, this group, the Islamic Society of North America. Their president, Mohammed Majid. This is a group who has President Obama's ear, has the ear of his administration. This is a Muslim Brotherhood-tied group. We know that because federal court documents have said it. It's not just Stakelbeck spouting off. Our own government has called this group a Muslim Brotherhood-linked organization.
Yeah, but
the FBI...
There are 6 members or member sympathizers to the Muslim Brotherhood on the White House staff getting paid by the United States taxpayer.
Yeah, this report originated in an Egyptian magazine last year, and you think Egypt would know a thing or two about the Muslim Brotherhood. An Egyptian publication in 2012 published an article which you're referencing, Reid, that said there are no less than 6 Muslim Brotherhood operatives working in this administration. So we have one individual named Rashad Hussain that's named in this article. He is one of the big Muslim outreach guys for the Obama administration. And it's interesting. He's apparently a guy who can recite the Quran. He can recite the whole Quran. And that means you're a serious Muslim. President Obama thought that was great when he hired Rashad Hussain to be his envoy to the OIC, which is the Muslim body at the UN. President Obama said, wow, he's a hafez of the Quran, meaning he can recite the whole Quran. Isn't that great? President Obama thought that was a great thing. So he's one of the guys named in this Egyptian article as a close advisor of the Obama administration, and there are others. I actually talk about that article in my book. But
yeah, I'm going to post that article or excerpts of it with your show. So this is not fairy tale stuff, folks.
No.
This is not Hollywood. This is a real life horror picture show, playing and being filmed before your eyes. We got 3 minutes left. What should people be looking for, Eric, in their local community, at their state, their county, their local community level, in terms of what are the red flags of this type of thing starting to infiltrate your community, your neighborhood, your town, your school district, whatever, and what can you do about it?
Yeah, it always starts with a mosque, in my experience. I've been investigating this for 12 years, Reid. It starts with the mosque usually. You must make sure that the mosque's ideology is not radical. How do you do that? You go into the mosque, you pick up the literature in the mosque, you research the mosque online, you research the imam, another key point. Who is the imam? Where was he educated? What does he believe? You can get to if there's Muslim Brotherhood literature in these mosques, it's not good. Where's the money coming from? What's the money trail for this mosque? That's another major factor here. So ideology, money trail are the 2 things to look for in the mosques. Here's the third thing. I find this time and time again. What is the mosque leadership, the mosque ideology? What is their view on Israel? The best way I feel, Reid, to recognize if a Muslim is truly moderate is to ask them a question. Do you recognize Israel's right to exist? It's very simple. If they don't give you an unequivocal yes answer right away, they're not moderate. I think that's another good litmus test. And what can we as Americans do? Number one, be informed. Listen to shows like yours, Reid. You don't have to be a foreign policy expert, but be informed. Know what's going on around you. For God's sake, put down the iPod for 10 minutes a day and just be informed. You owe it to your kids, your grandkids, and yourself to be informed about what's coming. Number 2, get in your local, your state, your federal officials, senators. Get in their ears. Congressmen, make your opinion felt, your voice heard about this. We still have freedom of speech in this country. Number 3, be prepared. Have that water. Have this. Exercise your Second Amendment right. Have some food stored up. Be prepared. Be smart about it. Number 4, you can get with like-minded individuals now through social media, Facebook, Twitter. You can hook up. Look at the Tea Party movement. Look how they did it. A bunch of like-minded, patriotic Americans hooking up. We can do it and make your voice heard. And the 5th thing, it might not be for everybody, but I find that it works. Pray. Pray for this country. Pray for our protection. Pray for your family. I think that works. On the government level, Reid, real quick, our government, it's not going to happen under Obama. This is what we should do. We should designate the Muslim Brotherhood as a foreign terrorist organization. The State Department has the power to do that. They are terrorists. Designate them as such. And number 2, any Muslim Brotherhood-linked front group operating here in America, ban them. They are seditious organizations that do not have America's best interest at heart and are fundamentally opposed to the U.S. Constitution. That's where I would start.
I think that is a great summation for the show. Eric, it's been a pleasure having you on. We're going to have you back on in a month or so. We'll see what kind of mess has bubbled out of the toilet of the Middle East, and we'll be talking about that and what its effect on America might be, and what its effect on the rise, fall, or shall we say, temporary neutrality of the Muslim Brotherhood at that time might be. So thanks very much for your time today.
Reid, thanks. Anytime. I really appreciate it.
This is Reid Lance Rosenthal on the right side, folks. Put your thinking caps on. Get Erick's books. Keep your eyes open. Stay safe. Stay healthy. And you know what? Stay wealthy. On the right side. We'll talk to you next Saturday.